You know that moment, when your heart races so fast you can hear it in your ears, when every instinct is screaming at you to run, but something deeper whispers, stay. You have to see this. That was me, just 48 hours ago. My name is Marcus Hayes, and I'm about to take you into a place that doesn't exist on any map. At least, that's what they want you to believe. It started on a rainy night in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of rain that makes the streets shine like black glass, hiding whatever's underneath. I'd gotten a tip from an old friend, someone who used to work deep inside government contracts. His voice was shaking on the phone when he told me, Marcus, you're going to find a gate. Steel. No signs. No guards you can see. But if you touch it, things will happen you can't take back. Most people would hang up. I grabbed my jacket and my camera. Hours later, I was standing in front of it. A massive, seamless door set into the side of a hill. No hinges, no handle. Just a faint hum in the air, like the sound of electricity crawling through the ground beneath my feet. I reached out. The air turned cold, colder than any winter night I'd ever felt, even in Chicago. And then, I heard it. Whispers. Not in front of me. Not behind me. Inside my head. They weren't words exactly. More like memories that didn't belong to me. Faces of people I'd never met. Places I'd never been. Moments I wasn't supposed to know. My hands were shaking now. My camera was rolling. And then, the hum stopped. I swear to you, this is the moment everything changed. Because when the silence hit, the door began to open. If you think you've seen everything the world is hiding, I'm here to tell you, you haven't seen anything yet. Stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, you're going to understand why some doors were never meant to be opened. I wasn't born into money. I was born into Detroit, on the east side, in a 2-bedroom apartment above a corner store that always smelled like fresh bread and diesel. My mom, Lorraine Carter, worked double shifts as an ER nurse, 12 hours on her feet, sometimes 16 if someone called out. My dad, well, he left when I was 5. It was just me, Mom, and my little sister, Danielle. Detroit in the late 90s wasn't easy. We had nights when the heat barely worked, and mornings when I'd scrape ice off the inside of my bedroom window. But if you stepped outside, you could hear it, the low rumble of jets from the old Willow Run Airport, a few miles away. Those planes would slice across the gray Michigan sky, and I'd stop whatever I was doing just to watch. I didn't know it then, but that was where the seed got planted. Most kids had posters of their favorite athletes. I had clippings from Popular Mechanics and old airline brochures I'd fish out of the library's recycle bin. I'd sit at the kitchen table sketching airplanes while Mom tried to get me to focus on my homework. By high school, I was running track. Not because I was fast, but because the field backed up to a chain-link fence where you could see the planes on final approach. I'd time my sprints so that the roar of the engines would hit right as I crossed the finish line. I told myself one day I'd be up there, not just as a passenger, but as someone who made the decisions about how those planes flew. That dream almost died senior year. My guidance counselor looked me dead in the eye and said, "Kids from around here don't get aerospace scholarships. Maybe aim for something more realistic." I remember nodding politely, then going home and applying to Howard University anyway. I didn't just apply. I wrote an essay about fuel efficiency in commercial aviation. I mailed it with my track medal tucked inside the envelope. When the acceptance letter came, I swear I could hear jet engines in my head. It came with a scholarship for aerospace systems and data optimization. A mouthful I would later learn was the key to making airplanes fly smarter, not harder. That's how it started. Not with a silver spoon. Not with the right last name. Just a kid staring through a chain-link fence, believing that one day she'd step onto the other side of the sky. Graduating from Howard felt like standing at the edge of a runway, engines roaring, the whole world ready to open up. I had the degree, the internship hours, and a senior project that had actually been published in an aerospace trade journal. I thought companies would line up to hire me. They didn't. It took me 5 months of sending out resumes before AeroVista Systems, a mid-tier aviation analytics company in Boston, finally called. I packed 2 suitcases, kissed my mom and sister goodbye, and took a one-way flight to Logan International. The first morning, I showed up in a navy blazer and my best heels, ready to prove myself. At first, I thought the little things didn't matter. The way people's eyes would skip past me in the conference room, or how my suggestions in meetings would get brushed aside, only to reappear later with someone else's name on them. The moment I realized it did matter came 6 months in. I had been working on a fuel optimization algorithm, a model that could save airlines millions by adjusting routes in real time based on jet stream patterns. I stayed late for weeks, running simulations, double-checking data. When I finally presented it, my direct manager, a guy named Steve, glanced at my slides, smiled politely, and said, "Interesting work. Let's workshop it a bit." 2 months later, Aerovista unveiled a new proprietary system at an industry conference. It was my model, my math, my work. Steve was on stage, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. My name wasn't mentioned once. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the Boston skyline. I had 2 options: accept it and keep my head down, or find a way to make sure my ideas had my name on them. I chose the second. I started saving every extra dollar I could. I took on freelance data analysis projects on the side. Small airlines, cargo operators, even a private jet company in Florida that paid me in installments. I built a quiet portfolio of success stories, the kind no one could steal because they were tied to contracts with my name on them. 3 years later, I handed in my resignation to Aerovista. Steve tried to act surprised, but I could see in his eyes that he knew exactly why I was leaving. I walked out with nothing but a hard drive of my own work and a folder labeled Carter Aerotech, Launch Plans. The doors at Aerovista had closed. But I'd learned something important. When one door slams shut, you don't stand there knocking. You build your own. Carter Aerotech was born in the smallest, messiest office you could imagine. 1 room above a tire shop in Dorchester, Boston. The rent was $750 a month. The carpet smelled like oil, and the only conference table was a folding car table I bought at a yard sale for $20. But it was mine. The first year was brutal. I was the CEO, lead analyst, sales rep, and janitor. My days started at 6 a.m., ended at midnight, and half the time I fell asleep with my laptop on my chest. There were weeks I had to choose between paying for new software or paying my own electric bill. I ate more instant ramen in those years than I did in college. But the work was good. I focused on smaller clients, regional cargo carriers, charter services, anyone who couldn't afford a big consulting firm but still needed to cut fuel costs and tighten schedules. We started winning contracts by showing real results. One client cut their annual fuel spend by 14%, another improved their on-time rate by 22%. Every win was another line in the portfolio, another reason for bigger players to take notice. Then came the call that almost broke me, and made me. It was a rainy Thursday when I got an email from North Star Airways. At the time, they were a struggling mid-size airline with outdated routes, rising fuel prices, and a reputation for delays. Their CEO had just resigned, their investors were circling like vultures, and bankruptcy was a word that kept popping up in the press. They didn't want to hire me. They wanted a quote for emergency operational consulting. I flew to their headquarters in Denver the next day. Their offices were half empty, morale was in the basement, and their planes were flying at barely 60% capacity. But as I walked through their route maps and maintenance schedules, I saw something everyone else had missed. This wasn't a dead airline. It had bones. Good bones. Strategic landing rights in secondary markets. Lease agreements that could be renegotiated. The real shock. They were burning cash because they were flying the wrong planes on the wrong routes, at the wrong times. I pitched them a radical plan: overhaul their scheduling algorithm, reassign fleet types, and implement a version of my proprietary FuelSense OS system. It would cost millions up front, but save them tens of millions within a year. The board balked. The investors hesitated. So I made a decision that terrified me. I offered to buy controlling interest, 51% of the airline, using every cent I had, plus backing from 2 private equity partners I'd been quietly courting. If it failed, Carter Aerotech would die with it. If it worked, well, I was about to find out. The day the ink dried on the deal, I officially became the majority owner of North Star Airways. The press expected me to hold a flashy press conference, cut a ribbon, maybe take a victory lap in the media. I did none of that. Instead, I made a deliberate choice. I would not step into the CEO role publicly. On paper, I was the Chief Transformation Officer. In reality, I had final say on every operational decision. Why hide? Because I needed to see the truth, the unfiltered truth, of how the airline treated people when no one knew the boss was watching. We quietly rolled out my first project, a mystery passenger program. I called it the Culture Scan. Every month, we placed trained observers, disguised as regular passengers, on random flights. They documented everything: tone of voice at check-in, how quickly bags came off the carousel, who got upgrades, who didn't, and why. They also noted how crew members interacted with passengers of different races, accents, or clothing styles. I didn't stop there. I personally flew routes without announcing myself, sometimes in first class, sometimes in economy, sometimes on standby. I'd walk through terminals, sit at the gate, ask questions at information counters. Always polite, always low-key. I wasn't looking to catch people slipping. I was looking for patterns. And I found them. In some airports, Seattle, Denver, Minneapolis, our service ratings were consistently high, and complaints were minimal. But in others, Miami, LAX, and most concerning, JFK Terminal 4, the numbers told a different story. Higher complaint rates. Slower boarding for certain passengers. More random ID checks for travelers who looked a certain way. We built a dashboard that aggregated this data into 3 simple questions for every passenger interaction. 1. Did this customer feel they belonged here? 2. Did this customer feel they were listened to? 3. Did this customer feel they were treated as someone who paid for this service? If the answer to any was no, it showed up in red. Within 6 months, JFK lit up the board like a Christmas tree. And one name, Heather Collins, appeared in multiple red flag reports. Same complaints. Same patterns. I didn't fire her. Not yet. Because data is powerful, but context is king. I wanted to see it for myself. So I booked a ticket, seat 2A, JFK to Seattle, and made sure I was the one checking in at her counter. I had no idea that decision would trigger one of the most public confrontations in my career, and change the airline forever. JFK Terminal 4 is always buzzing, a constant churn of rolling luggage, gate announcements, and the sharp scent of jet fuel that drifts in every time the sliding doors open. That morning, I arrived early. No entourage. No assistant. Just me, a black hoodie, jeans, and my carry-on. I wanted to blend in, to be just another passenger. I spotted her almost immediately, Heather Collins, standing behind the North Star information counter. Her uniform was crisp, hair pulled back into a perfect bun, smile ready for the man in the tailored suit in front of her. She handed him a lounge pass, laughed at his joke, and wished him a wonderful journey. Then it was my turn. "Hi," I said with a friendly smile. "Could you tell me where the first-class lounge is?" Her eyes flicked to my hoodie, then to my carry-on. The warmth drained from her expression. "First-class lounge is for first-class passengers only," she said, slowly, like she was explaining a rule to someone who didn't understand English well. "I know," I replied evenly. "I have a first-class ticket. Just not sure where the lounge is." She sighed. "If you did, you'd know. Check your boarding pass." Then she stepped sideways, right into me, her elbow nudging me off balance as she reached for a stack of papers. My bag wobbled, nearly toppling. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I stepped back, giving her space, but my voice was calm. "Could you just point me in the right direction?" Before she could answer, another passenger, a tall white man in a business suit, stepped up beside me. "Excuse me," he said to Heather. "First-class lounge." The smile came back instantly. "Of course, sir." Straight down the hall to the left. She leaned forward, almost conspiratorial, as if sharing a little travel secret. I felt the shift in the air. The man glanced at me, then away. Heather turned back to her papers like I wasn't even there. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I just stood there. That's when security arrived. 2 men, Rick Dalton, a veteran with a rigid stance, and Andre Lewis, younger, scanning the scene. "Ma'am," Rick said, "we've had a report you're causing a disturbance." "I'm asking for directions," I said slowly. Heather crossed her arms. "She's been aggressive. Making me uncomfortable." A woman in line spoke up. "I saw her. She didn't do anything. You bumped into her." Rick's jaw tightened. "Ma'am," he told the woman, "please step back." I pulled my boarding pass from my pocket and held it out. Seat 2A. First class. Paid in full. Andre's eyebrows rose slightly. Rick didn't flinch. I could have ended it right there. Flashed my business card, pulled rank, and watched the tone in the room change. But I wanted the full picture. The exact process that any other passenger in my position would face. "Let's go somewhere private," Rick suggested. "Sure," I said. "But we're recording this. And I want a witness present." In the small interview room off the concourse, I let them talk first. Heather repeated her version. I was confrontational, refused to comply, and escalated the situation. Then I asked Rick to pull the incident log for JFK over the last 18 months. He hesitated until I showed him my internal admin access card. His eyes narrowed, but he handed me the tablet. 63 complaints about discriminatory treatment in Terminal 4. 11 involving Heather. All quietly resolved, without follow-up. I looked up at her. "You know the most dangerous thing about bias, Heather? It's not when it's loud and obvious. It's when it hides in plain sight, day after day, until no one questions it anymore." Rick leaned back, suddenly connecting dots. Andre glanced between us, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I finally reached into my bag, pulled out my North Star Airways business card, and slid it across the table. Naomi Carter. Majority owner. The only reason I'm here is because I needed to see it with my own eyes. Heather's face went pale. The room went silent. And that was the moment the leverage shifted. This wasn't just about one bad interaction anymore. It was about a system. And I now had all the proof I needed to change it. By the time my car pulled into North Star's Denver headquarters, the story had already started to leak. Someone at JFK had recorded a piece of the incident and posted it online. It wasn't the whole thing, just enough to show me standing at the counter, Heather stepping into me, and security arriving. The comments were split down the middle. Some people defending me, others saying I'd played the race card. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, the air was thick. Marcus Hale, our CEO, was already pacing at the head of the table, tie loosened, phone in hand. Robert Greene, one of the most conservative members of the board, sat stiff-backed with his arms crossed, his silver cufflinks catching the light. Marcus didn't waste time. "Naomi, we need to contain this. A public apology from you. Keep it vague, non-committal. Maybe a one-day bias training so the press sees we're doing something." I leaned back in my chair. A one-day class isn't going to fix what I saw at JFK. This isn't about optics. It's about culture. Robert's voice was smooth but sharp. "With respect, you're majority owner, yes, but you're also responsible for shareholder value. Right now, our stock is sliding. Investors want this to go away quietly." I looked around the table. Quiet is exactly why we have a problem. You've been filtering service complaints through an internal review that deletes anything labeled resolved. That means patterns of bias never make it past middle management. How many passengers have we lost because they felt unwelcome? Marcus stopped pacing. "Even if that's true, blowing this up will cost us millions in PR damage." I tapped the folder in front of me, printed logs of every complaint from the past 2 years. Not fixing it will cost us more. And this time, I'm not asking for permission. Robert's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A full rollout of Sky equal V2, real bias training designed by behavioral scientists, blind evaluation for promotions, and a public quarterly report on service equity metrics. No spin. No burying numbers. Silence." Then Robert laughed without smiling. "And if the board says no?" I met his gaze. "Then we have a different conversation, about replacing people who think short-term profits matter more than long-term trust." The room shifted. Marcus's phone buzzed again, but he didn't answer. Robert leaned back, studying me like I'd just declared war. Which, in a way, I hadn't. Because the opposition had just woken up, and I knew they wouldn't go back to sleep without a fight. The morning after the board meeting, my phone lit up like a runway at midnight. CNN, the New York Times, and half a dozen aviation blogs were running headlines about the North Star incident. But this time, it wasn't just a shaky cell phone clip, it was the full security footage. Somehow, it had been leaked. You could see everything: Heather's shift in tone, the bump, the preferential treatment to the man behind me, and the way security handled it. And the comments had changed. Former passengers were posting their own stories, dozens, then hundreds, about subtle digs, delayed boarding, random extra checks, and being talked down to. Hashtags started trending, #FlyEqual and #North Star Stories. At 7:15 a.m., I got a call from Tanya Ruiz, a gate agent I'd worked with years ago during one of my undercover mystery passenger runs. Her voice was low but steady. "Naomi, people on the ground are with you. We've been dealing with this for years. Tell us what you need, and we'll back you. By noon, the employee intranet had lit up with anonymous posts from baggage handlers, flight attendants, maintenance crews, stories that never made it past their supervisors. Some were heartbreaking. A wheelchair-bound passenger left in the jet bridge for 25 minutes because staff forgot them. A young mother spoken to like a child because of her accent. Then something unexpected happened. The ground crews started sending me solutions. Simple fixes, things management had ignored. Better rotation schedules to avoid burnout, real cross-cultural communication training, a chain of command bypass for reporting bias directly to corporate compliance. I realized something that afternoon. I didn't just have a PR storm to manage, I had an army. So we made it official. I set up a secure digital portal called Ground Voice. Any employee, at any level, could submit reports, ideas, or incidents directly to my transformation office. No middle filters, no resolved stance that buried the truth. Within 48 hours, we had over 600 submissions. That kind of transparency scared the board. Robert called me, his tone clipped. You're giving them too much power. No, I said. I'm finally giving them a voice. The shift was immediate. Flight attendants began posting videos of small changes, more consistent greetings, quicker assistance for elderly passengers, crew members helping stow bags for short travelers. Passengers noticed. They posted. The hashtags exploded again, but now, half of them were positive. The tide was turning. And the real pressure wasn't coming from journalists or investors anymore. It was coming from the people who kept the planes flying. People the board had underestimated for years. It started quietly. Too quietly. 3 weeks after Ground Voice went live, I noticed small, strange delays in my access to certain company systems. Budget approvals that used to take hours now took days. My meeting invites with department heads were suddenly rescheduled without my consent. A memo about operational efficiency floated through internal email, suggesting all transformation initiatives be routed through the COO's office, Marcus Hale's office. On paper, it sounded harmless. In reality, it was a choke point. If Marcus controlled the flow, he could slow walk or bury anything that threatened the old way of doing things. Then came the meeting request from the board. No agenda, just a subject line, urgent governance review. I walked into that room and felt the temperature drop. Robert Greene sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, expression unreadable. Marcus was beside him, not looking at me. Robert cleared his throat. Naomi, the board has concerns that recent initiatives, while well-intentioned, are creating instability. Stockholders are uneasy. We think it's time to shift these programs under more experienced oversight. Translation: we're taking your power without firing you. I let them finish their carefully rehearsed points. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside was a legal opinion from Benton and Chase, one of the toughest corporate law firms in New York. It confirmed that as majority shareholder, I had binding authority over any operational or cultural change that did not require a formal budgetary vote. And Ground Voice, Sky Equal, and the reporting changes? All operational. I leaned forward. Gentlemen, this isn't instability. This is transformation. And the only people who should be uneasy are the ones who think they can outlast accountability. Marcus's jaw tightened. Robert said nothing, but his knuckles whitened around the folder. Then I played my last card. I told him I'd invited 3 major investors to observe our next board meeting, investors who'd publicly committed to ESG and DEI performance metrics. So if we want to talk about experience and oversight, I said, we'll do it in front of the people who write the checks. The soft coo died in that room. But I knew better than to think the fight was over. The old guard doesn't just retreat, they wait for their next shot. When you've been fighting shadows, there's a moment you realize the only way to win is to flip on every light in the room. For me, that moment came the morning a Wall Street Journal reporter called, asking for comment on rumors of internal resistance to my reforms. I could have issued a sterile press release, but that would have just fed speculation. Instead, I invited them in. We set up an open press day at our Denver headquarters. No staged photo ops. No pre-screened questions. Reporters could walk through our operations center, talk to ground staff, even sit in on one of the new Sky Equal training sessions. Cameras were welcome. That morning, I stood at a podium in our hangar, flanked not by executives, but by flight attendants, mechanics, and gate agents, the very people Sky Equal was designed to empower. I'm not here to defend a brand, I began. I'm here to defend a promise that every passenger who steps onto a North Star flight will be treated with equal dignity, no matter what they look like, where they come from, or what language they speak. Then we unveiled Sky Equal to the public. It wasn't just a training module. It was a 3-part system. 1. Real-time service equity tracking, using passenger feedback during and after flights. 2. Anonymous bias incident reporting that bypassed local management entirely. 3. Quarterly public scorecards, posted online for everyone to see, warts and all. I knew the risks. Once you commit to full transparency, there's nowhere to hide when things go wrong. But that was the point. The press ate it up. CNN ran a segment from inside one of our sessions, showing crew members role-playing difficult scenarios. A viral TikTok showed a mechanic explaining how cultural misunderstandings on the tarmac could delay flights. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Robert sent me a terse email, "You've given the media a loaded gun." Maybe. But I'd also handed our employees a shield. And for the first time, passengers weren't just hearing promises, they were seeing proof. Sky Equal was live. And with the spotlight this bright, the old guard couldn't kill it quietly. If they wanted to fight me now, they'd have to do it in front of the whole country. 6 months after Sky Equal launched, the first public scorecard went live. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the numbers on the screen, knowing the whole country was about to see them too. Were they perfect? Not even close. We had airports still flashing red on bias incidents, routes with slower boarding times for certain passengers, and a handful of employees who'd resisted the changes outright. But here's what shocked even me. Overall satisfaction was up 19%. On-time departures improved by 11%. Fuel savings ticked up 6% simply because smoother boarding meant less idle time at the gate. The financial press called it a strange coincidence. It wasn't. Treat people better, they travel with you more. They tell their friends. They forgive small hiccups because they feel respected. That loyalty translated into a 14% bump in repeat bookings. Even Wall Street noticed. North Star stock, which had dipped during the early controversy, was now at its highest point in 5 years. By month 9, something else happened. The same investors who'd once worried about instability were now asking if Sky Equal could be expanded into other areas of the business. Cargo, private charters, even our maintenance contracts. I told them yes, but not without the same transparency. The board meetings shifted too. Robert, who had been my loudest critic, stopped trying to cut off my proposals mid-sentence. He still didn't like me, but he liked the numbers. And numbers have a way of softening even the hardest resistance. At the 12-month mark, we held a small celebration, not in a ballroom, but in a break room at our Denver hub. Flight attendants hugged mechanics. Gate agents swapped stories with pilots. Someone brought a cake shaped like a boarding pass that read, Seat 1A, Destination, Equality. That's when it hit me, the paradox. Doing the right thing had been painted as a financial risk, a PR gamble, even a potential career ender. But, in reality, doing the right thing was the smartest business decision we'd made in decades. The old guard had always seen equality as a cost. Turns out, it was our biggest profit center. Looking back now, I realize this story was never just about airlines. It was about people. About the way we see each other when the clock is ticking, the line is long, and patience is thin. It's in those small, unscripted moments, at a counter, on a jet bridge, in the aisle of a plane, that we decide who we really are. When I first walked up to that counter at JFK, I didn't know it would spark a fight that would change an entire company. But it did. And here's what I learned. You don't have to own an airline to change the way people are treated. You just have to choose, over and over, to see the person in front of you as someone who matters. I've met gate agents who went from seeing passengers as tasks to seeing them as guests. I've met mechanics who now greet flight attendants by name before pushing back from the gate. I've met passengers who, for the first time in years, felt safe enough to fly alone, because someone on the crew made them feel they belonged. That's not just corporate policy, that's culture. And culture starts with us. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you're in a position, any position, where you have the power to make someone's day harder or easier, choose easier. The next time you catch yourself making a snap judgment based on someone's face, clothes, or accent, stop. Ask yourself if that's the story you want to tell about who you are. Because the truth is, equality isn't abstract. It's not a speech, a press release, or a mission statement on a wall. It's in the handshake, the eye contact, the way you speak someone's name. And if you think those little things don't matter, I promise you, they do. They add up. They change companies. They change industries. They change lives. So let's make that choice. Let's build that culture. And if you believe in this, if you felt the sting of being overlooked, or the relief of being truly seen, share this story. Tell it loud. Because some doors should never be closed, and the only way they stay open is if we walk through them together.